We've got two more speakers this afternoon, and we're looking at heavy-duty vehicles, I think, and at shipping and some of the decarbonisation options in those two areas. First up is Luke Marion, who is the Finance and Commercial Director at the Oxford Bus Company. And after that, we're going to hear Professor Bill Davids, chemistry at Oxford University as well. To you. Thanks, Christian.
Okay, guys, I've got a confession to make. I'm a bus operator. It has been a while since I've spoken to you all. I think the last time I came to one of these was in autumn 2019. Didn't really have any idea then what we were going to be doing for the next couple of years, but it's been lots of this kind of stuff for us. Lots of vehicles moving, and lots of things to do with face coverings and all of this exciting stuff. So yes, we've been doing that kind of thing of dancing when nobody's watching, which is bus operating when nobody's watching, maybe not. We have been working on a few things in the background while everyone's been staying at home. We've got a large bid in at the moment for battery electric vehicles. I think when I spoke to you last time, it was all about hybrid vehicles and the journey that we've been on with those and how we saw technology evolving. In Oxford, and we're expecting to hear the results of that from government in the next week or so. The money has to go out the door in this financial year, so there should be some decision at some point. I think there's nothing like a budgetary year pressure to finally get this. Within that, this is a sort of £55 million project. It's just for our share of this. Part of this, and the idea would be that we would electrify all the vehicles operating wholly within Oxford City. So not the vehicles that hammer up and down the A34 to Abingdon, not the vehicles that go to Reading, not the vehicles that go to airports, but the vehicles that operate wholly within the city are the ones we deem to be suitable for conversion to detail as to why that is shortly. So yeah, we are going to need to put about 30 million of our own money into that to make it work. So it's a significant investment, and you don't very often as a bus operator replace all your fleet in one go, or a large amount of your fleet in one go, because it's kind of against the principles of regular kind of drip feeding fleet replacement. We are up for doing it, but what we've said to the council is, we need to see an improvement in bus journey times for this to be financially viable for us. Because electric vehicles have got a lot of benefits, but they're also extremely expensive. So we're looking at probably double the cost of a diesel bus. We're also looking at probably £6-7 million worth of infrastructure into the depot for charging substations, that kind of stuff as well. Which is so people suddenly fucking get the bus but it's electric. So we said to the councillors we need to see a 10% improvement in journey times. They are looking at bringing forward car restraint measures, bus priority schemes, that kind of stuff, which needs to go hand in hand with this. It's not just a case of we spend on new vehicles. It needs to be a bit of a mindset change. And we have actually had some experience now operating some electric vehicles. When I came to the last one, I think it was at the Natural History Museum, I seem to remember. But everyone was bending my ear about why did I not have any electric vehicles in my fleet, and what was I doing about all this? We've got 3 vehicles here now in the sightseeing fleet that have had the guts taken out of them. The engines and gearboxes have all been removed. We've put some batteries and some control systems and motors into them with a company called Magtech. And they've actually been out on the road a little bit more recently, which is good. Obviously, we did that, completed the first one in March 2020. Probably not the best time to convert tour buses and to get operating experience, because we ended up suspending the tour for quite some time after that. But we have had them out on the road more recently. One's been out today, which is good. And these are quite small vehicles. They're doing 70 odd miles a day. They've only got 130 kilowatt battery packs on them, and they can charge off those 90 kilowatt battery. So they're not sort of your heavy duty, all day bus operations. They're operating small circle tours, 5-6 miles at a time, 70 miles in total, and they can do that with those 130 kilowatt battery packs. Give us some good experience of working with these vehicles, the sort of faults that they have, how you deal with the charging of them, the integration with vehicle systems, that kind of stuff's been quite interesting learning. I'm not sure I'd want to retrofit any more vehicles of this type, shall we say? Certainly not of this age, but yeah, certainly an interesting experience anyway. We've also been doing a lot of lobbying during the pandemic, so lots of government funding sort of keeping us going with our multi-million-pound losses. And we've been talking to the government quite a lot about what needs to be true for us to invest in zero-emission vehicles. So the vehicles exist, the technology is there, and the battery electric vehicles can complete the sort of duty cycles we need now for city operations. not for interurban operations I mentioned, but for city operations they can do it. The problem we've had is we've had subsidy inequality in the bus industry in the UK. We've had the government, they give us a fuel duty rebate at the moment on our fuel duty, very topical for today. We currently get about 35p a litre back from the government of the fuel duty that we pay for diesel. So we always incentivise to burn diesel. And we're not incentivised in the same way to move to zero emission buses. So we receive just 6p a kilometre for an ultra low emission or zero emission vehicle as a subsidy. So on a subsidy basis, there's a massive disparity between the level of subsidy we're getting for diesel fuel and the level we get for electric. So we've been lobbying hard on this to sort of say, well, the only way we're going to see this business case start to shift is if you actually change the subsidy landscape. And I'm happy to say that in that transport decarbonisation policy that was issued last summer, they did state that a 22p per kilometre rate would come in from the 1st of April this year. So that's coming in next week. And that's in line with some of the things that have happened in places like Scotland, where you've seen a lot of ZEBs deployed. There's been 300 odd ZEBs rolled out in Scotland ahead of COP26. Haven't seen that to the same level in London, in England outside of London, because that subsidy inequality has been there. So that's been something quite important. We've had to talk to government a lot about. This is what a P&L looks like for a diesel bus. This is what it looks like for an electric bus. Yes, unfortunately, yes, I accept that prices may come down in the future. There may be some economies of scale, but we've still got this significant gap in subsidy. And unless you sort that out, we're not going to see the level of step change that we need to see to achieve the decarbonisation aims we want to be getting to. So that's good. The way government funds ZEBs in England, outside of London, is that they give you a grant of 75% of the difference between a diesel bus and an electric bus or a hydrogen bus, and they give you 75% of the infrastructure cost. But the rest of it you're funding yourself, and that's in order to fit within state aid rules and that kind of stuff, which is obviously important because we are commercial businesses. We need to remain that way. But yeah, with that level of funding, you do need that 22p as a minimum to make the business case stack up. And obviously that's before Rishi took 5p off the fuel duty, so I have to rerun those numbers now. But that's made a big step forward. We will see more vehicles rolling out of that. Where the market is now on ZEBs, I think when I spoke to you last time, it was pretty much a London-only thing. We have seen some vehicles rolling out in the regions now. Like I say, there's been a significant number rolled out in Scotland. We've also seen Coventry has been designated as the first all-electric bus city in England, and they've put a big order in for over 100 electric buses. And it's primarily, we're looking at these kind of vehicles in this picture here. They are very large battery packs, single charge overnight. So you're talking 350 to 450 kilowatt battery packs. You do get into a diminishing returns scenario with these because power to weight ratio becomes a big issue. The batteries are very, very heavy. So for a 340 odd kilowatt battery pack, you can probably get 130 miles range. If you put an extra 110 kilowatts battery pack in there, another string, you might get another 20, 25 miles range out of it, but you're putting a huge amount of extra weight. Unfortunately, as a bus operator, you haven't really got much choice because either the bus does the duty cycle or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, it's not very useful to you, so you might as well not bother. So you're having to right size the vehicle to the duty cycle that you want it to do. And that's what we've been looking at, really. We're not seeing the things on the left there in the UK, the pantograph opportunity charging vehicles. The reason for that really is there's a multitude of reasons, but generally it comes down to the way lots of things are privatised in the UK, and it's very difficult to integrate infrastructure and the vehicles and make sure that there's always going to be that availability of pantographs when you need them, or indeed charging plates when you need them in the right locations to run the service. They have been quite popular in places like Sweden and other markets.
Could you say axle weight maximums increased to 19 tonnes? What's that from?
It was 18 tonnes. No, there was an increase of a tonne, which was important actually because it allowed you to get to this sort of 450 kilowatt battery pack size in order to deliver that 150 to 170 range, and that's the sort of sweet spot. Now, if you do the simple maths and you look at how many kilowatt hours does it use per kilometre and how many kilowatt hours are in the battery, it should be able to do a lot more than 200 miles range. The issue is, as a bus operator, that heating varies massively through the year. So on cold days, you will see 25-30% of your battery energy used by heating. And you open the door a lot, and the heat goes the door into the street. And also, your customers are paying to travel with you, so they need to be warm generally. Otherwise, they're not going to want to keep doing that. So you need to allow a big corridor for heating. You also need to allow a big corridor for battery degradation, because a bus is being purchased for 15 years. You are planning to replace the battery at some point within its cycle, but you only want to do it once because that battery is going to cost you 100 grand, even in optimistic prices. And therefore, it's all about trying to minimise that degradation. I've heard a lot talked about vehicle to grid and all that kind of stuff. There's no way in God's earth I'm going to allow my buses to be used for vehicle to grid, even though it's a great thing for energy transition. It's going to invalidate the warranties, it's going to use the batteries up quicker, it's going to degrade them, and I can't afford to replace them more than once. So for me, vehicle to grid, yeah, makes a lot of conceptual sense, but commercially, the returns are not there for me to do that at the moment as a bus operator. So yeah, it's all about, you need to allow yourself a decent chunk of headroom for heating. You need to allow yourself a decent chunk of headroom that on the coldest day in year 7.5, you can still complete that duty cycle, and you're going to be okay. So, and that a real head shift from where we are at the moment, where we fill the vehicle up with diesel, it goes out, it can do a wide range of stuff, and generally it's very unusual for the vehicle to run out of juice unless it's running night bus services or something like that, where we bring it back. We don't really think in that way at the moment. As part of doing this, we have to do a lot of thinking about how we schedule the vehicles, how we interwork them. We don't want to be carrying lots of extra vehicles just for charging spares, just to make sure we have to bring them back and charge them. So we have to, the way we do branding and allocation of vehicles is all going to change quite significantly. So that's the battery electric vehicles. Hydrogen. I know Bill's going to talk about this bit in his presentation, but hydrogen for buses, it conceptually sounds good because it gives you the benefit of fill the vehicle up within 10 minutes. When you look at the battery electric buses, you're talking 150 kilowatt chargers, probably standard. So you're talking 3 hours plus a bit of balancing to recharge the bus. Therefore, you don't really want to be recharging the bus during the day because it's going to be a significant amount of downtime. So you only really want to do it at night time. And you don't want to charge it much harder than 150 kilowatts because, again, you're back into degradation, warranties, all that stuff that I spoke about. Although there is up to 300 kilowatts charging available. Hydrogen gives you the ability to fill it up like a diesel bus. You can fill it up in 8 to 10 minutes. And you can put 30 to 40 kilograms of hydrogen at 350 bar. That should give you 200, 250 miles range. So in theory, that should give you what you need to bang up and down the A34 to Abingdon, Reading, all those sorts of places, and get over this issue of battery capacity and power to weight ratio, because hydrogen has a better density, and it should therefore act more like a diesel and be more flexible. Again, we haven't seen these vehicles deployed in big numbers just yet. Aberdeen have got a fleet of 15 of them. They've been up there since middle of 2020. There's 20 gone into London last summer, just recently on a project with Marion. And that green vehicle on the left-hand side, 20 of those are going into one of our sister companies in Crawley at the moment. They're on order, and they're going to get some experience of running those. A couple of reasons for why that is. One is the hydrogen infrastructure is extremely expensive, and there's only a limited number of players in the market that can fulfil that. There's a big shortage of green hydrogen as well in the UK, so subscribed. And therefore, if you want to have a hydrogen supply chain, you don't really want to be getting that from brown, industrial sources. You want it to be green all the way through. Really, is why you spend the money on the vehicles. So infrastructure is challenging in terms of cost. It's challenging in terms of lead time. Supply is a challenge, and when you get that supply, you're probably talking £6 a kilo for that hydrogen to be delivered. And that commercially, again, you're back in that kind of subsidy argument that we had on the battery electric, £6 a kilo with the 22p, you're still at a disadvantage towards electric, which is a worry. So commercials are challenging. The vehicles are costing £500,000 a bus, so they're even more expensive than battery electric. And the big issue at the moment that I've put on the bottom on there is usable range. It's great having the range, but you need to better use it and not take 30 hours a day to use that range, if you see what I mean. So the hydrogen vehicles that are there at the moment have got 48 kilowatt battery packs attached to the fuel cell, 48 kilowatt hours. The fuel cell effectively powers the battery, and the battery is topped up by kinetic energy recovery. So when you go on the dual carriageway and put your foot down, you don't do much kinetic energy recovery. So therefore, after a couple of minutes, your battery will discharge, and your top speed drops to 43 miles an hour, which for hammering up and down the A34 to Harwell, etc., not really what we want. So it's again that kind of concept of usable range. Yes, it can do the range, but not at a speed that anyone actually wants to travel on it. So the next generation, they're going to be more powerful fuel cells, less reliance on the battery, although the battery will still be there for the KERS system, etc. And that will change things and make things a little bit more usable. But in terms of is hydrogen the right fuel, I think the jury's still out in terms of the efficiency of it. How hard it is to transport, how you produce it, where you get it from. Lots of money going into projects in Saudi Arabia and places like that. They're going to give this alleged big boost to the green hydrogen supply chain. I'm not quite so sure. So I think we're going to watch what's going on in Crawley with interest and see how that develops. But certainly not going to be ordering any of those vehicles anytime soon. And I've just put a bit on depot infrastructure. This is something we've been wrestling with in Oxford as well. With the charging, this is a picture of our depot and some layouts that we've been looking at for the electric buses. They're on site at the moment installing the substation, which is interesting. In Oxford, we have got the Energy Super Hub project, which obviously has the private wire network. The cable happens to come right past our gates, so obviously we're working with them because it would be stupid not to. There is a cable that's going to come along the B480 into the corner of our site. So that red square in the top corner is going to be where the substation will be, and then goes on to Redbridge for the EV charging hub. One of the things we've learned about when we've started planning this out is that we're going to lose a lot of space in the depot for operating electric buses because we're going to have charging lanes, we're going to have Armco, we're going to have bases that the chargers sit on, we're going to have cables in the middle of the yard, and we're not going to be able to park the buses as close together as we always would have done in the past. And that means that we're not going to have as much. Think carefully about how we deal with that. I think when you go onto hydrogen, those challenges sort of multiply because quite often the hydrogen buses still need to be plugged in. You don't want your fuel cell freezing over at night, for example. That could be quite a concern. I mean, you've also got all the venting of hydrogen and all that kind of stuff to think about within the workshops. And that has its whole kind of different set of building regs to think about, which is sort of blows my mind. I've also said on their financing models require careful thought. The industry in the past has sort of worked in the UK on the basis that we buy all the vehicles. We make 8%, return on capital in general, and everybody's happy type of thing because we're an investable proposition. That's not really going to fly, I don't think, going forward. Looking at the electric vehicles, they are attractive investments for pension schemes, those kind of things, because they will see that from an ESG perspective, there's a good investment case there. They're quite risk-free because generally you can structure things in such a way the buses will always be used by City X, even if me as an operator isn't there. You can finance them at sort of 4 or 5% cost of capital, and these things actually start to stack up with the 22p and the subsidy environment that I spoke about. 8% cost of capital, absolutely no chance, and therefore you start thinking, well, are the groups really? What is the role of the groups at the moment in the industry to run this? Because what projects are we going to have that are going to return 8% cost of capital if we're going to be moving to decarbonising all of our fleet? It's a question I can't answer at the moment, but I've certainly made that point very strongly to my superiors. So, yeah, hopefully that's helpful. And I think we'll do a question at the end. Christian, is that right? Yeah. Okay. Cheers. Thanks. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Slide. Which on this should be after. So far, they came after the. So, I mean, I can start saying a few words actually, but also I think it's a fantastic thought that you do. It's a huge, it's just a big, experiment that you're doing actually. That's coming out with a whole lot of very valuable. And it's actually, it's drawing, all that information into that you've got the challenges that you have, and we've been chatting beforehand. The idea of, how can we help each other actually?
Ox project for us has been super helpful. That's the best thing for me to do for and it's helping the overall run of that project. In Oxford and Oxfordshire, straight away, they want lots more opportunities to do more.
questions now. State your name and where you're from.
I also found this really great work, and not on batteries, but I wanted to kind of just know what timeline are you 15 years of a bus time, or is it like the next 100 years? What would be with recycling of battery and the impact and cost impact of that?
In the UK, we are the fact that the bus industry in the UK is very short-term focused, I think, and I generally try and think for the long term, because my job, I'm a custodian of the company. I want it to be there in should, but yeah, we generally have to respond to the way government funding is going. In terms of the pantograph stuff, we have looked at that, but in cities like Oxford, you have a lot of terminal loops on your services. So your service gets to Blackbird Leys, it goes around the estate, comes back, goes into town. So the logical place to put all the pantographs and the charging is in the middle of town. Now, if you look at Oxford, it's not really a town where people are going to welcome lots of visual intrusion into the streetscape. So it's not really feasible in Oxford to implement that kind of technology. Although if you had it in town, it would work superbly well, and that would be where you'd want it as an operator. But there's multiple concerns with that. And yeah, so for us, we're looking at it at the moment, sort of thinking, right, we need to make a start on this, because if we're buying diesel vehicles now, we're going to be still using them in 15 years' time. Is that going to be a tenable position? Less and less confident about that, I would say. So therefore, I want to make a start on buying some non-diesel vehicles, and that to keep replacing my fleet. So therefore, that's something I want to be doing. So that's why we've gone down battery electric for the first bit, because it's the easiest bit to do, if you know what I'm saying. And then we've got a bit more time on the hydrogen, or whatever we're going to do for longer range services, to think about a bit more about where's the market going and what's the right thing to do for that requirement.
Follow-up question. I lived in Lausanne, and they had a very simple. It's kind of as a planning with maybe what hand in hand with the company.
UK, unfortunately not, no. So rail in the UK is planned primarily by sort of central government. So we do have some projects in Oxfordshire, like the Cowley branch line, where we're looking to try and bring more rail into use. And obviously we will think about that in our planning, to say, right, when that comes in, what are we going to do about services? What services are going to stop being feasible and viable, and what things are going to need to do for people stations? That's something I would look at in my role. So yeah, when you're trying to buy 100 vehicles like this, they're going to come in 18 months' time. What's going to change between now and then? Absolutely, that's something you've got to think about, because the network won't be the same in 18 months' time as it is today. There's going to be new developments, new things happening, and you have to sort of have a bit of flexibility there. But yeah, unfortunately, in the UK, integration between rail and bus is not what it is in other European markets, due to the fact that we're privatised, and the railways are all run by the government. And there's not. We do try. That's a good question. Anyone else? Hello, Felix. All right.
The airport route springs to mind. 250-mile range. I'll overcome the going down the M40 at 40 miles an hour problem.
Yeah.
Get you to Gatwick and back. How do you see the long haul routes in your operation?
No, that's a great question, Felix, because those vehicles are using 600 miles a day. So you're not going to get those even hydrogen in those ports have big challenges with this kind of stuff. They run a lot of surface transport. A lot of that runs very long hours. It'll start at 3-4 in the morning, run through till after midnight. For car park shuttles, airside transport, all that kind of thing. And also they've got all the power lifts and the stuff they use for cargo. So they're thinking a lot about decarbonisation as well. I mean, our thinking on those is that, the coach market is some way behind the bus market in terms of decarbonisation. There are a couple of battery electric coaches. They're vanity projects, really. They do 100 miles range, that kind of thing. It's good for a photo shoot, but it's not really going to be feasible in real world operation. So we're thinking with the coaches, hydrogen probably is the way forward, but you will need to have refueling facilities at both ends. So we are sort of talking to Heathrow about that at the moment to say, well, as part of their wider decarbonisation plans, they're looking at things like lower carbon, zero carbon jet fuels and all the stuff around the airport. And we're sort of saying, well, if you want all the coach network to continue to function, you are going to need to look at hydrogen refueling facilities in CBS, in West Ram, in the areas where our coaches will spend to their breaks, for example. So yes, that would mean the service have to run in a different way than it does at the moment, but it doesn't mean to the customer it will have to look that different.
It's your kind of expected probable solution,
with all the caveats that I said, really, I think it's difficult to see how we're going to get to the sort of energy density for battery electric that's going to give us what we need there, because coaches, you do need to be doing 70 miles an hour top speed. You need to be able to get to 60, certainly. You need to carry huge amounts of luggage, so the weight's quite high, and trunking up and down motorways, I'm not convinced that battery electrics with all the weight issues is going to be the way to go. You are going to need something that's got more energy density. So hydrogen seems to be the only game in town. You are seeing the Mercedes and people like that starting to investigate hydrogen coaches. But they're some way off for the UK market, that's for sure. I think HGV trucks, and from what I hear, they are looking to go down those kind of hydrogen stroke ammonia stroke, those kind of fuels, and where they're looking for sort of trunking freight, because a coach duty cycle is quite similar to trunking freight. Yeah, we're okay. Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
So Luke could talk about ammonia, I think.
Actually, I was talking to somebody, a very important person this morning, on one of the slides. That was common 5 years ago. When we were doing it back in 2011, 2012, actually. And so philosophy, I need to have to stay back here. Okay, yeah, and that's actually, what
Bill, the reason is to stand in front of the microphone for people who are joining online.
Certainly. Okay, sorry, I tend to wander. You were talking, Luke, about large buses. We're sort of 2 orders of magnitude bigger in terms of the challenges that we're facing, and certainly we can't use a cable to when we're in the middle of the oceans. But these ships here, actually, that we're talking about, these container ships, they're 75 megawatt engines, 100,000 horsepower, absolutely huge, actually. And so I have my own firm and established opinions on the way we should go forwards. But I thought what I would do is actually go and look at some of what I think is some of the recent and informed and balanced approaches to the way in which we should be moving towards net zero with maritime. And I've got, I think the slides will be available, but I've got the two sort of front pages there that I've got towards net zero. This is an excellent, actually more set of slides from Amplifier and the Sustainable Group at ETH Zurich. Sorry. And then the other one, the next wave green corridor, is the Energy Transition Commission actually bringing out a number of reports, one after the other. I'll be talking about two, stuff I'll be talking about will be mostly taken out, in fact, towards net zero, the Amplifier report. I'll see a little bit that comes out from the next wave, I thought actually I should also, put up the zero emission shipping that's come out of the Smiths Club. There's a lot going on in Oxford, and Renee and Zach and Richard have done a lot in this area already in terms of techno-economic assessments. I'll say a little bit later about what my role is in moving forward with this. Actually, is more on the technical side of things. Hopefully this is going to work. Yeah. So this is actually taken from this slide deck, actually, from Amplifier. And looking at all the different challenges that operational efficiency improvements, there's technical efficiency measures, and then actually there's alternative fuels. And the wording at the top, alternative fuels seem to be the only path to reach net zero, to reach zero. And in fact, in saying that, they are actually dismissing the low carbon fossil fuels, but also the carbon neutral biofuels. And in fact, biofuels, as a meeting in the Royal Society just over a week ago, we were talking about zero carbon aviation, and there's simply not enough biofuels. So we sort of punted into touch as well, as biomethane, of e-methanol and things like that. Now, I come back to at the end. Maersk have actually got a program in terms of e-methanol over the next 3 or 4 years, actually. And so, I mean, I'll be focusing on the carbon neutral hydrocarbon fuels and the zero carbon fuels. And here we have this is the the traffic light assessment of what carbon neutral hydrocarbon fuels and renewable electricity, the feedstock supply, the fuel production, the fuel distribution, and the fuel conversion on ship. That's where I'm working in terms of changing one fuel into another fuel. I won't say which they are at the moment, but then there's the zero carbon fuels. Now you can see that Amplifier are talking about a lot of red lights associated with carbon neutral hydrocarbon fuels, and a lot of that's actually around the direct air capture of CO2. But once you've captured it, you have to ask the question: should I not just put this in the ground rather than reuse it again? So there's a lot of caveats there. It's certainly, if you look at people like Maersk and others who are an MEN who are looking to the future, Maersk is obviously a big container ship company. Marion Solutions actually are responsible for half the pushing into these big ships. They're seeing, long term, they see the solution as ammonia. And I'll come back to see why that's actually obvious for the maritime community. Think about that in a minute. So this here, I mean, it's a struggle. Methanol, for example, but there's in the report, they do talk about that as an option, and I'll come back with my last graph, which shows the comparisons between fuel oils and e-methanol. But and that's green ammonia. So here, actually, if you look at the zero carbon fuels, everything looks good on the left-hand side, on the left-hand corner. But if you look at the bottom right, then there's a red star against the distribution, hydrogen distribution network, the global. And so we have one red traffic light sign there. To me, it's a showstopper. And I'll come back to that in a minute. We've got 3. And what about this Amber about all engines must be modified for both hydrogen and ammonia? Modify is the important one, because I know they'd be retrofitted with electric process. Have to do, because these ships have got life in 30, perhaps even 50 years.
Those engines are hugely expensive, don't we? Beyond that as well.
Yeah, it's huge. It's the size of a small cathedral. So actually, let's carry on with this. Actually, and I know that. So I'm gonna leave the red light for a moment. Actually, you won't be able to see all this. This is Man Energy Solutions. So, who are actually, they're the ones who design, these big stories, engines, 100,000 big megawatts, and they have actually, I mean, what, a couple of years ago, just before COVID, they were saying that they have actually, they've done they're going to be having, these demonstrators actually out there on the oceans. It's these are ammonia powered engines, and all the details about that. That's all about me. So, additionally, as well, actually, that these are running at 75 megawatts. But if you want to actually get your ship into port and move it around that, a megawatt's pretty much enough to be able to do that. And what else want to do is to see that solid oxide fuel cells, alkaline fuel cells, have a role to play in this as well. The important thing, if we take cells. It's a very difficult thing to do to get 6 nice purity hydrogen. Solid fuel cells, which is series power, and alkaline fuel cells, AFC energy, both UK companies. Again, unfortunately, small print, but with series power, they're talking about 1 megawatt, 1 megawatt solid fuel cell. And they're also AFC energy. I think they're talking about 600 kilowatt alkaline fuel cells. Technology. If we're looking, where do we invest? There's a huge amount of money. For me, if I were sort of a benevolent dictator in control of moving forwards, I would put a lot of investment into alkaline fuel cells, solid fuel cells, and same with alkaline electrolyzers and solid electrolyzers. So these are things that are really going to happen. 1 megawatt. Solid fuel cells, 1 megawatt. Alkaline fuel cells. Solid fuel cells is 3 more direct ammonia. Cracking in series power about how we move forward with that. Yes, the energy, again, 95% conversion actually from ammonia to hydrogen, but that other 5% for ammonia is okay because AFCs are ammonia tolerant and we don't need to that is going through. So you're looking at ammonia as the basis of the fuel for these to fuel cells. We may well want to crack to a small amount of hydrogen. That's technology that we've been developing comes in. Let me go quite quickly on now. I've got 12 slides and I know that we started late, but here's the existing global ammonia infrastructure. Now, again, this question hasn't heard about the money before. You do realise that 40% of the nitrogen in your body is actually come through the alkaline concepts. It really is as pervasive as that. It's hugely after cement and steel. It's the most CO2 emitting manufacturing process. Bundled into the chemical industry, but 90% of the chemical industry CO2 emissions is ammonia. And so it has a big existing. I've got an energy vector, which I've got is RB as going from A to B and from T1 to T2. And A to B actually we're talking about, and I'm sure that this is current ammonia has got heat maps across the planet. There are 182 million tons of ammonia produced each year. Most of it actually in the country of manufacture. That's important in terms of energy security, in terms of democratization of energy. But the 25 million tons per year, so if you convert that into energy, that's 4.8 megawatts per ton, and that's actually taking the heat of vaporization into ammonia into the situation. Then that's 120 terawatt per year. That's actually moving around the planet. We're using the fertilizers. It doesn't know what the material it's going to be for you to fertilize. So and then here's the US infrastructure. This is something that I managed to get from Trevor Brown from the Ammonia Energy Association. He gave me a big Excel spreadsheet that my daughter's actually turned into a map. And this is Iowa. This is the breadbasket of the United States. There's only 1,000 sites, 800,000 tons of ammonia facility sites in the UK and a lot of per year in terms of storage capacity, turning that into energy. These numbers, this isn't a gigawatt hour, this is a terawatt hour, this is 70,000 gigawatt hours. It's absolutely huge. They say you can't actually take in Los Angeles, we don't have money in the town centre where we got ice rinks, we got cold storage facilities actually. In the middle of LA, you can see downtown LA, actually that little cluster there. The one at the bottom there behind the port of Los Angeles is 100,000 tons of ammonia sitting there already. Okay, so if I take the furthest left here in the middle, so this is a Chevron facility, and in fact, I've given a talk before and said, is that real? I said, well, I've actually got the longitudinal average up on Google Maps, and fortunately, you can still just see it there. It's the red mark there. That's 30,000 tons, which corresponds to 120 gigawatt sitting there, and it's at the end of the LA runway. Can you see the LA runway up there? Actually, it's relaxed, and it's sitting less than 400. I think it's about 400, and it's there, sitting there already. Okay, it's brown ammonia, but the Tesla started with gray electricity, so that we can actually we've got a platform that we can move from in our net somebody this morning who didn't know that ammonia could be used. And incredible. Anyway, so we'll go to the hydrogen infrastructure now, and this is the issue that Luke has. Where do we get it? Can I really do it real time? 6 megawatts to actually produce a ton and a half of pure hydrogen a day. Actually, when I don't know if I'm going to get cheap electricity to do that. So this is what's hydrogen been used for in the past? Well, it's been used for petroleum refining, ammonia production, methanol production, and then we've got a bus there. It's not 10% used on buses actually, but each of these actually, with the oil refining, that Chevron facility actually, it's got steam reforming methane there, and the hydrogen is there just for a moment, and it's not moved more than probably 50 meters. So hydrogen in every part of the history of the production of industry, whether it's oil refining, ammonia production, methanol production, has been a transient. And we've labeled the hydrogen economy, and it's there for seconds, and it goes for meters. And that's the history. This is where we are at the moment. So when we talk about a vector, it's the shortest vector you're going to get. It really, simple as that, is common sense. And yet, I was involved in a meeting, a serious academic meeting not so long ago, when I was not allowed to think of cracking ammonia other than 100% to hydrogen. So here's the hydrogen infrastructure at the moment. Now, this is end of 2019 as well. Somebody put up a 2019 number before, and so things haven't really changed much. These are the hydrogen refueling stations, the things like what ITM Power are doing. Actually, there's 434 on the planet, and there's about 12 or 15 in the UK actually, and down there actually we're looking at the number of cars. Actually, there's 7,500. There might be 10,000 hydrogen cars on the planet at the moment. If you actually do the numbers, that actually corresponds to 420 gigawatt hours per year. That's 12,500 tons. Now, we're talking about something that's much, much higher, a factor of 2,000. Well, here you go, it's up here, actually, 870,000 gigawatt hours per year. It's just a different number altogether. And yet, we're singularly going down the hydrogen route. Okay, so, I feel as though I'm standing at a pulpit of evangelism for ammonia, but it makes no sense. So here's actually out of these green corridors, and what I want to show, and this is where hydrogen becomes the subject of the sentence. Actually, we're talking about bunkering places, and where we can actually have that in the route from Rotterdam all the way through to Singapore, Tokyo, and of course to the northwest of West Australia. And we talk about the green hydrogen projects that we need to do. But all that we're doing is actually we're producing green hydrogen to turn it into something else. And when chapter 1 actually starts with water, it doesn't start with hydrogen. But hydrogen suddenly becomes a subject of chapter 2. And chapter 2 is a very short chapter in terms of how far you move the hydrogen and how long you take with the hydrogen. Because 2 minutes, okay. So this is my last slide, and so here we have. This is actually from the from the energy transitions one, and here they're talking about. And I'm sorry, I hope you can see that. We got heavy fuel oils. Actually, there's where we are at the moment. That's the yardstick, and we're talking about a sort of 45% increase if we go to ammonia, and this is green ammonia, and it's something. It's higher for methanol actually, or e-methanol. So this is e-ammonia and e-methanol, 2030 and through to 2050 actually. But this isn't a huge difference. It's a penalty that we have to pay. But if we can actually get these container ships, with 75 megawatt engines, and that's what Maersk are actually putting on the oceans in 2025, we must be able to do Oxford buses. And with that, I'll end. Thank you.
because although she took all the proper precautions and asked for consents and so on, she actually reported on what was being said in one of their meetings. And her take on them has been that they've been extremely foot dragging on decarbonisation, and that they're very secretive in the way they operate. Well, as witness her being, banned from reporting on them. So my question is, how much sort of political backing is there for the sort of transition you're talking about? How much does the IMO matter in all this? And what sort of timescales are we talking about realistically for making a serious decarbonisation in this industry, which has been under the radar for such a long time, as it were, when it comes to decarbonisation, and really is only now being sort of dragged out into the daylight?
If you look at Money Energy News or whatever, there's a lot that's coming out now, actually, where companies like MAN are actually taking the initiative, Warsaca as well, actually, so that it's become visible. With the IMO, and I'm going to pass this to Renee as well, actually, because within there is a conservatism, but I think I've been to certainly one of their meetings where they do realise that. That, and they say ammonia is going to be the future. In fact, there was one of the Nordic ministers actually was saying from Norway, saying that don't even bother about LNG now. Let's move faster. But
yes, yeah. What I can say is that I really think it's one of the organizations that have some teeth in terms of saying, if you don't have your ship, emitting maximum of whatever by this year, we won't let you operate. First and second, it's global, because if only one country or 10 countries did that, then some other countries would not necessarily adhere to that. But IMO is, as far as I understand, big enough and powerful enough. And from what I read, really driving towards this. So I think.
And that's my impression as well, actually.
Yeah.
And there's all the regulation, and it takes years to go through the regulation and the certification. And actually, putting your money on a ship as a cargo is easy, but using it as a fuel, it's related, but it's different. But you've got to have a flag state. Actually, I think was it Norway, and there's some company they're trying to push that through, as quickly as possible to get it regulated. And I guess if MAN are looking to have something, on the ocean by 2024, then they're only going to be able to do that if the regulations are in place. So. And what's also interesting is that you look at all these big, red, bunkering ports there, and by and large, actually, probably almost for sure, there's ammonia there already. Yeah. With MAN, they say a 2 to 3% change to basically the top of the engine. But that's a chemist talking.
No, I concur with that. Retrofitting is by far not going to dominate the costs. Right now, the problem, quote unquote, is the fact that green ammonia is more expensive than heavy fuel oil. But, and here's the but, this is right now, according to some calculations because of a number of factors, by 2030, there's going to be dozens of places in the world that will be able to produce, we believe, green ammonia cheaper than some fuels, and by 2050, pretty much anywhere, because technology costs are going to go down, and carbon taxes we can expect are going to go up, and policies, so on and so forth. So frankly, I think if I were a maritime company, I wouldn't think it twice. New ships need to be built with these sort of technologies. And there was a recent report also where, in fact, they made some plans, pathways, they call it, rather than plans, on how to do or to achieve this thing. And basically, in my opinion, they were not ambitious enough, because by 2050, in this particular report, they basically say that is still a substantial amount. I forget exactly how much, but say 25 to 30% of the fuels by 2050 are going to be fossil fuels still. But I really think that they haven't seen at the future cost of green ammonia. And by future, it's again not 2050 necessarily, even 2030, 2035 or so. It's going to be cheap.
So actually, looking at one of Renee's papers, actually, when it's by 2030, you're talking about less than 10 cents per kilowatt hour. What's also interesting, in fact, actually, is that, I mean, why is ammonia not not more prevalent? Why is it only hydrogen when hydrogen doesn't have an infrastructure? We're talking about things that are 1,000, 10,000 times more. It's because if you actually think about the two molecules, CH4 and NH3, NH3 is one carbon bond less and it's got nitrogen rather than carbon. If you're talking about bringing your ammonia in at 10 cents or less than that a kilowatt hour, to Foley or to Tilbury, that means that we can pump that up to Heathrow. And that's the only way we're going to get jet zero aviation, with a non-carbon fuel. I mean, the ATI, the Technology Institute, are redefining their fuselage shapes actually to be able to put a liquid hydrogen in the middle of the fuselage. We believe you can actually retrofit an A320 and get all the way from Heathrow to Istanbul. Because this is a fuel that I'd say has very similar performance. Actually, what we are talking about doing as well, actually, with the retrofitting of the aircraft engine, is that we do 70% ammonia, 30% hydrogen. There's a number of people doing this. Felix, I should pass over to you actually.
Yeah, so in engineering, we're looking at reciprocating engines, so marine type engines, but you're going to want some hydrogen in there alongside the ammonia. I think it's about 3466 will give you the same combustion properties as natural gas. So then you can look at using existing, natural gas engines exist, in all sorts of applications. But I think I just wanted to come back to a comment that Bill made about kind of perception and regulation. You would not believe how challenging it has been to get ammonia into engineering. We still haven't actually managed it yet because the safety officers, the suppliers, et cetera, just hear this word and think we're going to kill ourselves. Any storage of ammonia needs to be at least 10 meters away from a building. Well, if you're in engineering, we're going to have to put it in the middle of the university parks. I mean, there are no places that are that far away from a building. But yet, like Bill was saying, you can have fertilizer storage that is ammonia right at the end of the LA runways. So I think we need to think about public perception and regulation hand in hand with this, because it's not. I've spent a career burning gasoline and diesel, which are a hell of a lot more flammable than ammonia.
Yeah, I mean, actually, talking to somebody from DNVGL, which is one of the big maritime companies. Now, genuinely wanted to know what the hydrogen infrastructure was, and said it doesn't exist in maritime. And they said, and it won't. And the last thing we're going to do is put 5,000 tons of liquid hydrogen in a port. It makes no sense. And then also, when you look at all these things now, where are you hearing about does ammonia make it into the news every day in terms of of danger? Actually, a couple of days ago it did, because it looks as though the Russians were trying one of these false flags by bombing an ammonia facility, 50-ton